Hi, you're listening to the From Imposter to Empowered podcast. I'm your host, Jill Perrick, a life and success coach who specializes in helping working professionals and entrepreneurs overcome imposter syndrome. If you feel like you're not as smart, capable, or worthy as you actually are, and that someone is going to find you out, you've come to the right place. I use social and cognitive psychology, neurolinguistic programming, and somatic healing to take my clients from imposter to empowered so they can go after the success that they want and feel worthy of it too. Let's dig in. Hey, my loves, welcome back to the From Imposter to Empowered podcast. I'm your host, Jill Perrick, mindset coach and the Imposter Syndrome coach for coaches. And I'm so happy to have you here today. Is it like mid-February when you're listening to this? I think so. Valentine's Day is around the corner. I am almost a month out, turning 30. What am I going to do for my 30th birthday? I've been thinking about it. I was thinking about actually doing like a post about like 30 things I've learned, turning 30, and maybe I'll do a podcast episode. It'll be like business, life, all the things. You know what? I did this TikTok video, and it was this sound where it was this old woman, and she was turning 110, and her granddaughter was like, "How old are you?" And she's like, "What?" And she's like, "How old are you?" And she's like, "I have no idea." And then her granddaughter's like, 110. And she goes, "What?" Anyways, it was a trend. So I truly feel like I'm like 25. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this on the podcast. But now that it's coming up, of course, I want to talk about it now because my brain. But I just want to say really quickly that one of the best things that I ever learned was how much time I had. And especially in my like mid-20s, I wish I could go back and be like, "You're fine." I wish I could go back and be like, "You're good. You have so much time. You have so much time. You know, you're going to feel like you don't have anything figured out, but why do you need to feel like you have everything figured out?" You know, and when I was 25, I was still doing my master's. I was still trying to figure out what the fuck was going on with my life. I had no idea. Living paycheck to paycheck, you know, like just living that normal average life. And I was like, what am I going to do with this life? I need to have everything figured out. I wanted to be engaged and married and have kids by the time I was 27. Who like put that in my head? I have no idea. So I had a lot of these false ideas of how my life should be at a certain time. And those timelines mean nothing. And honestly, when you release them and you stop making them so important, it's just like manifestation fucking 101 is when you release the pressure of needing something to be a certain way is when it begins to happen. And I feel this way too about my debt. Like I used to have a lot of shame around my debt, but now that I don't, it's starting to fall away. And it happens so much faster when you release your fucking chokehold on it. So I just want to say that in terms of that will probably be in the episode about like just taking my time and knowing that age is just a number and the world is changing. And I know that things can happen really fast if I don't stay so attached to the timeline, because really the timeline is something that I just create on my own. And for anybody who wants to come at me about having kids and being on a biological timeline, they actually did like research studies about the percentage of your fertility dropping, and it is actually like a big scare tactic to tell women that their chances of conceiving go down like significantly more after a certain age, when really it's only like 8% or something, which can seem like a big deal. But I know that as a cisgendered heterosexual woman in this world, I know that I have struggled with being like, when am I going to have kids? I'm on a ticking time clock. And that just helped me a lot. It helped me really shift into thinking there's no big deal. Like I can take my time and we can take our time. And once you have kids, you have them. I have a lot of clients who have kids and I have a lot of friends who have kids. And once you have them, like, okay, you have them now. Like that is, it is a shift in your life, and I don't have to feel like I can rush into it. Whenever I rush into anything, it never turns out the way that I want it to. So I can take my time and you can take your time too. So I just wanted to start with that. As well, I am taking on one-to-one coaching clients. This is the only way that you can work with me. It is a 6-month container. And this is for the coach, the leader, the person who wants to break through imposter syndrome and break through to their next level, whether that's in their career or their business or their life or all three. If you want to feel more worthy, if you want to step into your power, if you want to say things and become the person that people look up to and that they see as the expert, if you know that you have magic to put into the world and you feel like there are things holding you back from being able to do that unapologetically, then I would love to have you in one-to-one coaching. So you can go to the link in my show notes and book a sales call with me. I will be selling one-to-one spots until I'm booked out. And I'm not going to tell you how many people that is, but we're taking on more than we ever have before, which is kind of scary for me, especially because I'm like a time freak. Like I really like my time freedom, but that's a whole other podcast. I still have time freedom. I'm just saying, like, it is scary taking on so many clients, but I have so many more management skills and tools now to do that in an ethical and integrous and emotionally supportive way. So if you want me to talk about that, I totally can. Reach out to me on Instagram and I'll talk about it. So today's podcast episode, I've almost forgotten what it is, but I just looked up my notes. That's what happens with my brain. But I looked at my notes, and this is like a very simple mindset shift that I was coaching with a client one day, and we were talking, and I honestly feel like sometimes I channel during sessions, which I would say that I'm like in the beginning stage of being spiritual in terms of really understanding how my presence is spiritual and how I attract is spiritual. Like I always see angel numbers, but I also know that my eye is looking for them. But still, like there is a benefit to leaning into the magic and the possibility that has greatly benefited me and my business and my clients. And when I coach, sometimes I honestly will tap into that feeling and being like, help me, whoever it is, universe, God, whoever it is, help me channel like the best coaching for this client today. I always say that right before I get on the call, whether it's a workshop I'm doing with my clients or one-to-one clients or the Worthy Woman Method clients, I always tap in for a second. And if you are not tapping in before your sessions, if you are not setting up your desk and lighting a candle, if that's what you're into, and setting an intention, absolutely do that because it just gets you into the vibe. You should definitely do that. But yeah, so I feel like sometimes I channel during sessions. And when I was talking to this client, I just kept hearing this. And it was, why are you so hell-bent on being in the energy of your biggest failure or your biggest mistakes instead of being in the energy of your biggest accomplishment? And let me tell you why that is such an amazing mindset shift is because, especially if you struggle with imposter syndrome, your brain is programmed and wired to think about all the things that you have fucked up. It's programmed to think about the things that you're not good at, the things that you have screwed up or the mistakes that you've made. And this comes from a survival standpoint in terms of being, if you're aware of your downfalls and your limitations and the things that you're doing wrong, then A, nobody can hold you against them, and B, your brain falsely believes it's protecting you, right? So if we look at it from a more biological standpoint in that sense, then that makes sense. It makes sense, especially if you struggle with imposter syndrome, which is unworthiness, which sends your brain into that survival instinct a lot of the time, then that's going to happen because your brain is more predisposed to focus on the negative instead of the positive. And making this shift is something that will feel very unnatural to you. However, it is really important to make the shift because you will realize that it is just an energetic shift. And what I mean by that is that you being in the energy of your mistakes and the things that you're doing wrong is a fearful energy. It's a fearful frequency. It's you showing up and being like, okay, so I'm saying this on this mini training, but I know that I've struggled with this and they don't know that behind the scenes I've done X, Y, Z. And it doesn't come across as you feeling confident, and that will translate when you show up, whether it's in a meeting, whether you show up on social media, whatever it is, when instead making the shift into, but what have I accomplished? And this is why I have the accomplishment journal. And sometimes when I'm feeling really down on myself, I'll stop doing it and I notice it and I'm like, fuck, I gotta get back into that accomplishment journal. Even if it's like, I did this task today, it could be the smallest task, but I make sure to fucking write it down, because paying attention and keeping on your accomplishments and not being a perfectionist with your accomplishments. So not being like, I had signed a client today and that's the only acceptable accomplishment. Me being like, I unstacked the dishwasher even though I was really tired. That's an accomplishment. Or a client said, I resonate with this so much, and that to me is an accomplishment, right? No accomplishment is too big or too small. So if you don't have an accomplishment journal, it's basically at the end of the day, you sit down and you write all the things that you feel like you accomplished and that felt really good for you that day. It can be anything, no judgment, no rationale in terms of being like, I signed this client, but she was a referral or whatever. You just write down the accomplishment and that is that. And if you do this on a more often basis, you are shifting into the frequency of being like, I am in the energy of my biggest accomplishment. I am in the energy of the things that I have done that have been good, that have contributed to my self-worth, that have gotten me to this point, instead of all of the things that you feel like make you a piece of shit, instead of all of the things that you think you did wrong or that you think make you a fraud. So especially in the instance of feeling like a fraud, let's say for an example, you're a coach and you're showing up and you're talking about, let's say you're like a life coach and you're talking about relationships and you're talking about how to communicate with your partner. And all you can think about as you're talking about this on your stories is talking about how you and your partner had a really big fight last week and you were a fucking bitch to him. This is a very honest example, right? And you were a bitch and you didn't handle it right. Whatever. That's what you're telling yourself as you're doing this. And you can start to feel like, oh, like I feel like I'm not showing up in that energy, which instead you can direct your brain to a time where you guys did communicate really, really well and what worked when you guys communicated really well, and just simply shifting into that and pointing your brain in that direction, especially if you have a neurodivergent brain and wants to think in that all or nothing thinking, pointing your brain back to, but there are so many things. There are so many things that we've done right and so many things that have been good. And when I asked my client to be in that energy, they were kind of like, oh, wow, like, it just feels kind of fake and like abnormal, but you guys know that with the brain, everything is going to feel fake and weird and abnormal at first. But if we look at the cold hard facts, did you accomplish that thing or not? Yes, there's no reason for you to not believe it. And even so, even if you're like, but I haven't accomplished that, Jill, somebody else has. So even if it's not your accomplishment and you're saying, I want to make 10K a month or something like that, and you're like, but I haven't accomplished that, and like, I feel inferior because of that, but somebody else has. So if it's possible for them, it's possible for you. And that's why it always comes back to you. And you could argue, well, I haven't yet, and this is why, and blah, blah, blah. And that's your opportunity to do the mindset work. That's your opportunity to look at your own limiting beliefs and think, okay, if I don't think I can accomplish that, why, right? And to look at yourself. So at the end of the day, I have an example too where I have hundreds of testimonials for my clients, hundreds. Video testimonials, screenshots, all the things. I have had people be like, you changed my life. Multiple people have said, you've changed my life. This is so good, blah, blah, blah. My brain wants to focus on the 2 or 3 clients that I think didn't get results, or I think didn't get results that were good enough for my high standards of myself. Right? And this is me being hyper vigilant and like interpreting their behavior in a certain way, or just assuming, or I hadn't talked to them in a while and just assuming that they were unhappy with my content. I think about this one client who actually ended up working with me long term, but she was in a different container with me before. And I told myself for months, because she would always watch my stories meticulously, I thought that she was watching my stories because she hated me, which is so ridiculous. But I thought that she was watching my stories because she was like, oh, this person is talking about all these things and she didn't help me and blah, blah, blah. And then she ended up signing on with me for a different container. And I was like, oh, it was an option for my brain to say, she actually wants to work with you more because you had such an impact on her, right? But my brain wants to go to those 2 or 3 clients where I was new and clunky and figuring shit out, or the ones that like fell off and couldn't pay me. Like, my brain wants to go there, but I know that there are hundreds more of the opposite. There are so many other people, and my brain is just hypervigilant. It's anxious. It wants to look at the negative because it wants to protect me, and your brain just wants to protect you too. But that's why I call this like a shift. A mindset shift is not you being like, this is my natural state. A mindset shift is you being like, I am shifting into this energy. So I want you to think about this when you are going out there, you're doing the thing, or you're doing a task and you don't feel good enough. Like right now I am writing my Imposter Syndrome book, and every time my brain wants to say this isn't good enough or whatever, which is like all the time, I am like, if I was feeling the most confident ever, if I was shifting into my testimonials and the power that I know that I have and the knowledge that I know that I have, what would I say? And it is a shift. It is a shift that I have to go into over and over and over again until it becomes more natural and more automatic, you know, and it's going to feel uncomfortable at times. But again, that is like, you are literally changing your brain. So if you expect it to be easy, don't be silly. Don't be silly. Okay. So yeah, this is a little simple mindset shift, not so simple sometimes, but it is a simple shift that you can make and that you can become aware of, because if your brain has those back of the brain thoughts when you're doing things like, oh, but that client, or oh, but you actually struggled with this, so are you qualified? It's like a very faint whisper. Your inner imposter is whispering in your ear, and it could be something that you've never verbalized. It could be something that you have never written down in your journal, or it could be something that you always have in your journal, but it's usually something that you haven't really said before or aren't trying to give a voice. But it can get really, really loud if you keep just bypassing it. So first of all, dump out all your thoughts, even if you think that they're ridiculous, because you will really realize a lot of things when you do that. But also noticing when your brain is going into that survival mode. Notice when your brain is going into, here are all of the things that we've done wrong, but what if we thought about the things that we've done right? And what if we decided to dump those all out or pay attention to those every single day? And you will notice how your confidence grows exponentially. So your task is to do an accomplishment journal, okay? And let me know how you feel about all of this. And you can send me a DM at your coach Jill, and you can also apply to work one-to-one with me in a 6-month container. It will absolutely change your life, and I'm fucking certain of that. So you can go to the link in my bio and book a sales call. I love you guys. See you next week. Thanks for listening to the From Imposter to Empowered podcast. Head to the show notes to find out how you can take this work deeper with me in one-to-one coaching or in my lifetime group coaching program, The Worthy Woman Method. In the show notes, you'll also find a free 3-day challenge to start the process of overcoming your inner imposter. And once you're done with that, screenshot this episode and share it on Instagram, tagging me at Your Coach Jill so we can connect. See you next time.